which is again, it's just the different type of sampling, different type of collecting data. Sampling is basically collecting data. Okay, so again, on your homework, they will ask you, they will give you some example, and they say, is this a stratified, is this a clutter, or is this a systematic sampling, right? Voluntary and convenient. So again, you can look at those. You can try to do the homework, and they have more explanation on those. 1.2, which is a different type of data. So the first thing is the overall item we have in 1.2 is the data set is basically a set contain all of a collected information, right? So you can collect whatever information you collected, that will be our data set. So inside our data set, we have a few things, which is the breakdown of a few things, which is the individual. The individual, which is again the type of information that you want to collect, right? So again, the individual here can be a student, right? So the individual here can be, you want to collect the student, right? Or the type of plant, or the type of animal, or anything that you want to collect. So the individual is the item that you want to collect. And inside the individual, inside the student, you can collect your variable. So what is the variable here is basically the characteristic of each individual. So what does that mean? Meaning you can collect the student grade, the student age, the student weight, the student height, right? So the variable here is, again, the variable can be the grade, can be the height, can be the weight, can be the ACT score, can be whatever variable you want to collect from the individual, which is, again, for instance, if I want to collect information about you guys, which is you guys will be my individual. Each of you guys is the individual. And then again, if I want to collect the height, which is your height is my variable. And again, the last bottom item we have is your data. So what is your data? The data is basically the value, the number represent, or sometimes it's not a number, it can be a name, right? Your name is your data, right? If I want to collect the name of how many Williams is in my class, well, the name William will be my data, right? So again, in this case, the data is not really the value. Is if it's a later on, if it's not a qualitative data, it can be it can be qualitative data in terms that it can be a name. Okay, so your data here, which is a value. So in this case, again, the 21 years old is my data, right? So as you can see, the individual is each student. That's my individual. The age is your variable, and the 21 is the data. So it's basically like a breakdown tree or a Venn diagram, right? In the center, your data is the number, describe the variable. The variable is your individual item, and then the individual is basically the data set, right? The data set contains everything that you want to collect. Okay. You will see that they will say a lot about a variable, which is, again, the variable is just different category that you want to collect. Okay. Like I say, if you want to collect the temperature of a day, right? You collect in the morning what's the temperature, in the afternoon what's the temperature. So the temperature will be your individual, but the actual value, the number 97 degree, that will be your data. Okay. So let's take a look at this thing here, which is, like I say, they won't ask you a lot about in terms of variable and data. It's just easy for us to communicate. If I say the data, you know that the data is the value represent whatever we want to collect. So there are two types of data, which is, this is what you guys need to know, the difference between the qualitative variable. And again, qualitative variable is sometimes called category variable, where the data can classify into category. Meaning, again, gender, right? Gender can be male, female, the type of color, right? Color and type of call. those are in different category, right? So qualitative data are the data that you know, and like the student can be qualitative in terms of freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior, right? I can put you in different category, then that will be qualitative data. And you will see that qualitative data versus quantitative data. Quantitative data are in terms of this thing here. Variable, you know, for me, variable and data are interchangeable, ladies and gentlemen. Variable, like I mentioned, variable is the individual we want to collect, the characteristic that we want to correct. The data is the actual number. So you will hear me say that qualitative data is the same as quantitative variable, okay? So the data is just the actual number or the actual name, okay? But anyway, qualitative variable, let me correct myself to correlate with the books. Quantitative variable is just basically your variable that relate to your numerical, is tell you the amount of something, right? Your age is the amount of how long you have been living, right? The mileage in your car, which is how long that car been used, or the weight, which is again the amount of something. So quantitative, which is think in terms of quantity, right? Quantity meaning again how many items do you have, right? Quantitative data meaning how many item, what is the number in terms of that. And qualitative meaning quality, which is quality, is it good or bad, right? Those are your category, right? Quality is you either have a good quality or a bad quality, right? So again, quality, different category, and quantity, which is qualitative, meaning the amount of something. Okay, so again, on your homework, they will ask you to verify is this item, which is, I think I have the example. Well, we would do, I think, the example later, but I think on your homework, they ask you to verify is this information, is this data a quantitative or qualitative. Okay, so again, quantitative is the amount of something and qualitative is the category. Okay, so again, there are two types, which is inside qualitative, inside your category, there are two types of variable, which is ordinal. Ordinal is basically the category can put in some order, which is again the letter grade, right? In our class, the letter grade, you can put them in some order. The size of your substring, right? Small, medium, large, extra large. Top 10 single in a recent years. Or the pain level, right? How painful is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In terms of your pain level or the stretch level or something in terms of that. And nominal variable, nominal variable is basically you cannot put them in order, right? The qualitative data that you cannot put them in order, meaning gender, right? Gender is you have a male, female, that's your category, right? But does the order matter? Can we justify male, female better than male? Not really, right? State of resident, meaning again, the state of resident doesn't, New Orleans is not better than Marrero, right? Unless you say it is. But again, the state of resident is doesn't have a order in the sense, right? Phone number. The reason I put phone number and zip code here is nominal data is not always just letter. It's not always just some number you cannot put them in order, right? Zip code, there's some order, but the zip code itself does not show any important, right? New Orleans zip code and Baton Rouge zip code doesn't show any important in terms of that. So you cannot put any zip code in order. So that's why it's nominal. Okay. So basically, if there's some ranking involved, then they're ordinal, meaning again they are important in terms of ranking. If the ranking does not involve, then it's nominal, meaning you cannot put them in any order. Okay. So again, that is your qualitative data, which is your category. Right. And lastly, your two type of quantitative data, which is quantitative data is the amount of something, the number represents something. Inside this thing here, you will have a descriptive variable. Descriptive variable is basically one thing about descriptive variable versus continuous variable is descriptive variable is basically a counting number. Most of the time, descriptive number is basically a whole number in terms that you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in terms of just a counting number, right? The number of siblings, which is you either have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't have 4.5, right? You probably say, well, I have a half brother or sister, but again, it's a whole person. So we count as a person, not like a half a brother in terms of that, right? The number of electrical outlets in a house, which is, again, you either have 10, 20, 30, right? You don't have 15.5 or 15.25, right? So most of descriptive, just think in terms of descriptive is a counting, is a whole number. Every time you move, it's either one unit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Continuous variable is a variable can break down in terms of some interval. Meaning, again, your weight, you can break down in terms of, you say, let's say if you weight and you say you are 135 pounds. Well, are you really exactly 135 pounds, or are you like 134 pounds and 7 ounces? Right, or something in that nature. Meaning, as one thing I tell my students is, continuous variable is basically if you can break that to different units. If there's some interval breakdown to some different units, then it's continuous, right? The temperature in a room is continuous, meaning, again, it can be 86 degree or 86.5 degree or 86.1 degree or something in terms of a small interval. It's not really exactly at 86 degree, right? And again, the person's age. One thing I want you guys to see that the last item here, I put out the person's age over here can be both in terms of discrete and continuous, depend on the warden, right? The person's age in general, my age in general is continuous because every minute I'm reading, it keep on continuing going, right? Let's say I'm 36 years, 10 days, 3 hours, 45 minutes, 2 seconds, right? Meaning, again, is you can break down into different variable in terms of that, then it keep on continuously, not exactly, I'm not exactly 36 years old, right? So that's why age in general is continuous. Unless you say, wait a minute, Mr. Tran, why over here and the age of the person at his or her last birthday? Well, last birthday, that is the exact number, right? Last birthday, I'm 35, right? Last birthday, I'm 36, or in terms of that. So at your last birthday is a fixed number. At that exact moment, you have a fixed number of age, right? But right now, my age is continuously growing, right? I'm continuously 1 second older than the previous second, right? So every time right now is continuously. That's why you have to make sure the age determine if it's continuous or discrete based on the description they give you. Okay, so make sure see the difference between the two. One general advice is if you can break down into a smaller unit, then they will be continuous. If you, for instance, if the height, right, 5 feet 2 inch, right, is it really exactly 5 feet 2 inch? Not really, right? It can be 5 feet 2 1 inch 1.9 or something in terms of that. So if you can break down to a smaller unit, different kind of unit, then it's continuous. Okay, the number of day or something like that is just fixed number. Is you cannot break it down. So again, that's the difference between continuous and discrete. And again, continuous and discrete describe your qualitative. Qualitative meaning the number, the amount of something. And Nominal and ordinal describe qualitative, which is category, okay? And 1.3 is very short. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in 1.3 because design the experiment. The only thing I want to point out is the difference between experiment study versus observational study. Experimental study is basically the study where if you are a tester, if you are a conductor, you give your subject, you give them something to either increase or decrease their ability. Then that's the experimental study, meaning you for instance, you as a tester, you say, okay, I want to test this medicine to see if they have a good effect on my subject. You go in and you give them the medicine. You individually go in and give them the medicine, and then you write out the response, right? So that's your experimental study, meaning you actually physically doing something with your subject. The observational study is basically just like the name. You do not interfere with the subject. You just observe the subject, right? Someone else give the medicine. Someone else gives something, right? The placebo, right? The placebo study, right? Someone give you either a medicine or a candy, and you just go in like day one. You write out your observe. You say, okay, this person day one did not feel good, right? Day two, we don't know I don't know what you give them. I just go in and just observe how their physical or whatever I try to test, see if they are changing or not. So those are the two main things, which is experimental, which is basically you go in and you actually physically, or you have something do with your experiment or your subject. Observational, you just observe. You just sit there. You don't know what the subject have. You don't know what they got. You just observe and see what is the different in terms of that. So those are the two main things. In 1.3, you can read it. You can read. They have different type of observational study, different type of experimental study. But again, we are not really go into detail because I don't think you guys need to design an experiment. But if you all later on design an experiment, you will know what kind of experiment you want to do. Either a experimental study or a observational study, and from there, you can do it. So again, 1.3, that's the only two things we want to look at, or you want to look at, is what is the difference between experimental study versus observational study. 1.4, I think the 1.4, I think it's like biased and unbiased data. Basically tell you sometimes your data can be biased, which will overly either overly or underly estimate your item. So sometimes if you collect data and it's just leaning on one side, it's basically kind of biased in that way. So again, 1.4 is not important. That's why we skip in terms of that. So most important thing in chapter 1 was the parameter versus statistic, and sample versus population, qualitative versus quantitative, discrete versus continuous, nominal versus ordinal. Those are all the items that you want to focus in. And I think on your homework, they will ask you to describe the different, or not describe, but answer the difference between those. Okay, so let's take a look at chapter 2. Chapter 2, this is where we head toward in terms of if we go out there and collect data. Chapter 2 is now how can we organize your data and present your data. Okay, so which is again all this thing here, will be the way to organize your data. So again, frequency, which is again you put them. The frequency is basically your data or your variable, how frequent does they appear, right? How often does your item appear in your data set? That's your frequency, right? And your frequency distribution is basically the table distribution frequency distribution table is basically you organize your data into each category or each